Hi, beautiful souls. I'm Elizabeth, and welcome to Untangling the Heart. This time is for you. So grab your cup of coffee or tea or whatever brings you a sense of comfort. Sit back, relax, and settle in. As you listen today, just notice what resonates for you. There may be something here that's meant just for you. It's so good to have you here. Today's episode is focusing on breaking the cycle in relationships and self-worth, recognizing long-standing patterns and the turning point that can lead to meaningful change in our lives. And I am so privileged and honored to introduce you to my guest today. She is the amazing Lynn Lionhood, and Lynn is going to be sharing her heart-filled soul with us today and taking us on her journey of awareness, healing, and rising above unexpected challenges. And if anyone can do it, she has done it. So I'm so excited. Lynn, I'm truly grateful that you're here today.
Thank you very, very much, Elizabeth. You have become a wonderful friend and have really guided me through some of the times that I was a little bit lost and wasn't sure why I went through them, but you've made me a stronger person because of that.
Well, we all rise together when we link arms. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So share with us a little bit about yourself.
Mom of 4, grandmother of 15, which I absolutely adore. In fact, my oldest grandchild just turned 33 today. The youngest is 10. If there was nothing else I accomplished in life, those would be the two things that I would be most proud of, that I know I was a good mom and I know I was a good nanny.
Beautiful. And just share a little bit about what do you do? How do you serve our world?
Work with Legal Shield. That's what I have to do. And what I want to do is the host of Lunch with Lynn, where I get an opportunity to connect people and watch them just flourish, teaching them about building a relationship, which is so much more important than selling their widgets.
Absolutely. I love that. I so totally resonate with that. So tell us a little bit about your experience and how you recognize these patterns in your life and what happened that shifted everything for you.
Elizabeth, I think that I was always just wrapped up with being a really great mom, really immersed myself in everything that I could possibly do to be there for my children, to guide them, to teach them everything that I thought was important in life, and had the most wonderful husband in the world. I mean, he's the kind of a guy that put his arms around me and protected me, sheltered me a lot. And so I was very content and happy, and especially happy in my role as a wife as well. He took on the responsibility of making all the big decisions, and that was fine. It isn't that we didn't discuss them, we did. But I deferred to him because he was the man of the house, and that was the position and the spot that I wanted. And all of a sudden, one day, everything changed completely. When I look back now, I feel almost as if I was a young girl in my role. And when the whole world changed for me, he had this life-altering accident where he should not have survived. And I think when I often look back at that, I think that I have a strong faith in God, and I think that God doesn't make mistakes, but I think that God thought it was time for me at 34 to realize that I was more than I was giving myself credit for, and that I was a stronger person than I was ever giving myself credit for. And so when this accident happened, when I go back and look at it, because when you're in the moment, you don't see these things. But when I go back and look at it, I realize that the only way that I could learn that lesson was for God to take everything away from my husband. He could have taken him totally out of the picture, but he didn't do that. I think he knew how much I loved him and needed him. And so he took away his ability to respond. He stayed in a coma for months and months.
Wow.
He was unable to communicate with me. So all decisions, I mean, from 1 minute of him making all the decisions, the next minute, everything fell on my shoulders. And it was a little overwhelming, but if you rely on God and you say your prayers, somehow you get that strength, and you're not even sure where it came from, because I don't remember struggling with these decisions. They just seemed to come to me. Thank goodness they were all good decisions. But I see now that's exactly what he wanted me to learn, because when I go back and look, that is the biggest lesson I learned, that I was so strong and I never gave myself credit for it. And I was fully capable of making all those decisions, but I had to be careful to not take what I had learned and then run with it for the rest of my life and say, now I'm in charge. That isn't ever what I wanted. So at some point, I realized that my husband, because he had been so ill for so long, it would have been very easy for our roles to have totally shifted, and to me to become the mother and him to become the child. But at some point, I realized it's time now for me to go back to my role, stronger, much stronger now. And I knew he would see that in me, and I would become the wife again, and he would become the husband again, but we would be a more powerful team. And that's really what has happened.
Wow. That is just incredibly compelling. A lot of people experience something very unexpected in their lives, maybe not as shocking as what you did. I mean, when we have things happen unexpectedly, it can have a shock to our system. How did you feel in those first few hours, if you will, if you even recall? What were those feelings that you had?
Those memories of what I went through are so vivid. I can close my eyes and I can be right back in that time frame very easily. But once I actually saw him and realized this is happening, when I saw the priest and knew how serious this really was, I truly relied on my faith most of all. And I said my prayers. And when I go back now and look, I ask for a lot of strength to be able to accept whatever God had planned for me to go through. I only ask for two things. I ask for the strength to be able to cope with whatever decision God had made. And I also asked if he would spare him, I would spend the rest of my life showing my gratitude to him for what he had given me as a blessing by blessing someone else every single day of my life. And so I want you to know that it was far more than just how this was going to affect me. As I said my prayer, I thought about his mother and his father and how this whole incident was going to affect them. Now, this was his stepfather. His father had passed in his early 40s, and my husband always said he wouldn't make it to 40. And here he was at 39, standing at death's door.
Wow.
So it was very frightening. But I thought, if I were the mom, this would be devastating. And I don't want to push aside her just because, I get center stage. No, that's not the way it was. I loved my mother-in-law so much, and my heart broke for her that she was looking at her child like this. She had, a few years prior to this, experienced her only other child laying on life support when he had had a major accident. And so I thought about how this was going to hurt her and how I was going to have to be strong for her as well. And I also thought about my 4 children. They were small. They were 3rd grade to 9th grade. And I knew that their whole life was going to be upset. They would wake up that morning. They would not find me there. They would see a neighbor, and I had to arrange for someone to go and take care of them. And they would be very upset at the fact that their life wasn't running normal. I wanted to be in charge enough to let them know that I could take the worry on my chest and I would help them through this. So I knew that I could never fall apart in front of them. If I did, they would be frightened, and that would become a problem. So I had to be strong for them. Anybody who's been through something very major understands. You now realize who you thought was going to be beside you in times of a struggle, and you're shocked when you find out it isn't the ones you thought. And the ones you never thought were going to be there, they were just kind of in the background.
Yeah.
Step to the front and become the pillars of strength that you need at that time. And I will never forget those people that stood with me. I remember one of my husband's commanding officers that I had never met before. I was frightened to go to sleep for fear he would die when I was asleep. And this gentleman said to me, I'm not leaving your side. I will sit in this chair by this bed. I want you to lay down and I want you to get rest. He gave me his watch and he said, I want you to hang on to this, which I kept for almost a year and then returned to him finally. But he said, I'm going to watch over you to make sure that all is well. If something serious comes up, I'll wake you. I didn't even know this man. And we became really close during this time.
You know, this is a fascinating segue. And thank you so much for sharing this. And you know, what I'm hearing from you is this strength, this not only physically having to do everything and your whole life being turned upside down, but it's the you know, the emotional strength of just pulling yourself up. But then I'm also hearing two other things. I'm hearing that we cannot do this alone. I know that you talked about your faith in God and praying and asking for the strength and asking for him to be able to survive through this, which I know fortunately he has. Um, but it's the community that stepped up. And I love how you said, you know, those people whom you thought you could depend on really weren't the ones. It was the ones who came out of the shadows. And we can't, it's very difficult to do things alone. So even though you were put in this position where now your relationship changed, not because you wanted it to, you were very happy with what was going on, but a situation turned everything upside down. Community came out to support you. And I think that's really been your focus too, of how you have continued to move forward in your life and your business and everything that you've done is gathering people together in community, because we can't go through things alone, even when we pull our strength up from the ground up, right? And it's also about giving people, which you didn't plan, and you would have never planned this, and you would have never asked for this, and you would have never wished for this. And we've all gone through something where something has happened where we didn't ask for this. Why is this happening to me? Why me? Why us? Why my husband? Why whoever it is? And yet there's this unspoken gift that is put out into the world where now that gentleman who got to sit there and be with you, you didn't know him at all, but you were actually, the both of you were giving him a gift of being able to give back. It was his free will and his free choice to be able to step up and do that. But do you see how through sometimes tragedy, you talked about you grew through this unfortunate circumstance, but there was this ripple effect. Don't you agree? And how it gave other people an opportunity to grow as well.
It did.
Wow.
And I will tell you honestly, many, many times through these years, I have spoken to my children and to my husband, and I've asked the question, if we could all go back and make the accident never happen, would we do that? And we all agree we would not. It was a good thing. It was a tough thing. I'm not gonna say it wasn't, but it was a good thing. It not only taught me about strength, but it showed my children that in the face of bad things like this, because people need to realize children are always watching. Many times in situations like this, the children are pushed off to the side and pretty much ignored, not realizing that children are watching, saying, what happens when something like this happens to me in my life going forward? Because it will. Will they say, I succumb to this and I'm going to lay down on the ground and kick and stomp my feet, and that's not going to change anything? But that's sometimes what they learn because their parents kind of show them that. And
Right.
that's what they do. And I wanted my children to know that this is the time you don't question your fate. You can get through this. Trust me. There are people that face far worse things than I was going through. I watched when I was in the hospital, people whose loved ones passed. Mine had not passed. So every day that I was there, I felt was a blessing. I think my children learned that. I have watched my children as they've grown through the years face some incredibly difficult situations. Watched my daughter go through that brain tumor. came through it like a trooper and was strong. Let me tell you, she was left a quadriplegic and it was tough, but she got through it. Watched one of my sons lose his fourth child. And that's something I've never gone through. I can't tell him I understand. I really don't understand. And I don't want to experience that. But he came to me and said, as a child, he was in fourth grade. He said, as a child, I watched how you dealt with this situation and I will get through this. And I said, and I will stand with you. And I told that to his wife. I said, I love you. Now that child last week would have been 15 years old had he been here. We held him when he was born. I don't forget him on his birthday. I don't forget him on Christmas. I don't forget him. He's a part of our family. He came here. Why he was only here for such a short period of time, we don't know. We're not expected to know. And we're not expected to be angry about it. God has a plan. We'll see all of that in time. And I'll see that little boy again. I know I will. And he probably won't be a man. God will make him grow up and then he'll know me and I won't know him. But I think I'll know him. I've watched them face some really dramatic things in their lives. And they've gotten through them because as parents, we have to mirror how to be strong. We don't have any choice. And I wouldn't trade any of these things. We've gotten stronger through every one of them. But our unit as a family keeps pulling together.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love this, how we segued into the effect of the children as well. And they do watch. And yet, I think there are sometimes when we go through something very difficult, whatever it is, whether it's about loss of money or someone gets very ill and everything changes, everything shifts. And it does make a huge emotional impact, not only physical and everything else on the children, but a huge emotional impact. And when a parent is upfront and, at the level, I mean, if they're 4 years old, you have a different type of conversation with them than you do if they're 16 or whatever, depending on their maturity. But I found that hiding information, I'll share just something briefly. When I was 11, we went on a vacation and I had a dog at home. And when I got home, the dog wasn't there. And a month went by and the dog never came home. And I kept asking, where is she? And then finally, a month later, I finally got that something was wrong. And then they finally told me that she had passed when we were away. And it all trying to just protect me and hide my heart from pain. And yet the repercussion of the emotions that I trapped for decades beyond that was feeling vulnerable and not trusting and so many other things that when you're upfront, when we're going through something that's really challenging, no matter what it is, just be open and honest. Because number one, they're watching. And if you're doing one thing and you're saying another, those children they're going to know eventually. So, how did you handle things with your kids and when your husband was so ill?
It's funny. The way I handled my own children and the way I handled my daughter's children when those two incidents happened, I went home from the hospital with my own children and they were very young. And I sat them all down on the kitchen floor and we all sat like little Indians in a circle and held hands. And I said, I'm here to answer every question that you've got about what's going on. And their questions from the 9th grader to the 3rd grader were totally different. But I'm glad that I did that because I didn't realize some of the things they were thinking. The littler ones, the boys, were afraid to go walk on the sidewalk for fear a big truck would hit them. Like it had hit their father. Never even dawned on me that would be something they would be afraid of. They also were afraid that my husband had lost body parts. And I said, he has not. And I thought, they wanted to take his arm. I'm glad I didn't agree to that. I also gave them each a photograph of him. And I said, I want you to carry this with you everywhere because we were such a close family that my husband would always kiss them goodnight, even if he worked different shifts. And I said, I want you to carry this with you everywhere. Carry it in your pocket when you go to school. Take it with you when you go to baseball practice or the girls, if you're babysitting, wherever you are. and put it under your pillow at night, and you talk to daddy, and I promise I'll bring him home to you. I didn't realize that my girls were afraid to ride in the front seat of the car for fear that something would happen to them. So you have to address these things. Otherwise, they just fester and get bigger, and then they live with those fears. Now, when it came to my daughter's children, they were 15 to 12. And I realized that because they were a little older, I sat down and I had a similar conversation. And I said, look, this didn't just happen to your mama. This happened to the family. So I'm going to give you each something that you can do to help to get through this. And that ownership of giving them something to be responsible for did two things. It made them feel good about what they could contribute. And number two, it made them feel like they were a part of her recovery. So I took one of them and put him in driver's ed so that he could drive mama everywhere she had to go and daddy had to go back to work. I gave the second one, I said, I want you to, mama's been homeschooling you. You know how to take copious notes. I want you to go to therapy with her, take copious notes every day on what she's doing, videotape what she's doing on your phone, take it home. And for 4 days, you're going to be her therapist because she's only going to get therapy 3 days a week. And if we want her to get well, she needs it 7 days. And he agreed. 14 years old, he agreed. The 13-year-old, I said, she's a girl. I said, you remember how I've cooked with all of you? You're going to have to make all the meals. Mama doesn't have arms and legs that work anymore. And she did. And the youngest one was a slob. And I said, you can't be a slob anymore, Brett. Now you have to be in charge of the chore chart that I made for everybody. You distribute the chores every week, and then you inspect those chores. So I made them little certificates after a month saying that they were the best at whatever it was they had been given the opportunity to do. And it really made it easier for them to accept this. Even when she came home, I noticed that they felt they were part of her recovery. When they couldn't think of all these different things that they could do that the therapists were doing, they would say, we'll play chess with mama so she can learn how to grab the pieces with her fingers that weren't working and learn to move them and put them where she wants them to be. They played bags with her to teach her how to use her arms again. I mean, they really were wrapped up in what they were thinking they could do to make it better for her. So I do think that assign them something to be a part of the recovery. It will give them things to take their minds off of the doom and gloom and always looking towards the positive.
Oh, that's brilliant. And that's a way to get through the overwhelm. But underneath that emotion is the feeling of not being in control, lack of control. You can't control what the situations are. And so I think it was brilliant. And I'm sure that's when you stepped up and said, okay, now I've got to work. Now I've got to do all of these things. And now I have to be responsible for the finances, and everything fell on your shoulders, and it is overwhelming. But you not only gave the grandkids things to do, but yourself as well, is what can I do to feel more in control? Because there are things that do happen to us that we're not in control of. But I think that's brilliant. Giving each person, or giving ourselves, a way that we can feel like the ground isn't being pulled out from under us. I think that's absolutely amazing.
Elizabeth, I'm going to tell you in all honesty, I don't want to fool anybody. I think as strong as I tried to be, I did fall apart at one point.
Sure.
And I'll be honest. I think it was a little over a year after the accident happened. And my husband would go to sleep in the morning when the kids would go to school, and he would sleep all day. He had remembered going through cardiac arrest, and it was always at night. So he didn't feel comfortable sleeping at night. He wanted someone to watch him.
Mm-hmm.
So he would go to sleep. The kids would go to school. And once everything was calm, I would go into the bathroom and shut the door, and I would just cry from deep inside myself. I couldn't stop it. I don't know what I was crying about. I'm a very happy, upbeat person. I wasn't really sad, so I'm not even sure why this happened, but I would cry all day long. It wouldn't stop. And then when I knew it was time for the kids to come home from school and him to wake up, I would wash my face, put on a little makeup, and I would act like everything was fine. And this went on for a little over a week. Uh-huh. And I would have to take him to see a doctor every other day to talk about the trauma he had gone through. And one night I took him to the doctor, unbeknownst to him and the doctor. I said, Doc, tonight I don't want him to tell you anything. I need your help. And the doctor said, "You need my help." I said, "I need your help. There's something wrong." So I told the doctor what was happening, and he said, "Let me explain what's happening. I think it's important for anybody listening to this to know this." He said, "You have always hidden what has happened. You haven't cried about this. You've been strong for everybody and everything. And now that you've got him home, it's like a sense of relief that, okay, he's past that big hurdle. He's now home. And now your body is just saying, I have to release this."
Yes.
That's what you're
Yes.
doing. And I thought, really? And he said to me, "Do you have a hobby?" I said, "No." I said, "Doc, I have a sick husband and 4 children to take care of." He said, "Did you have a hobby before this happened?" I said, "Well, I draw and paint." He said, "I want you to go back and I want you to do that until I see you next week, 1 week. I want to see you and I want to see how things have gone." And I had always dreamed, I mean, literally dreamed. I'd never had any training, but I always had drawn and painted. And I had dreamed of these huge, large pieces that I wanted to do, circus wagons. And so I went and got a big piece of board, 8 feet by 4 feet. Thought it would take me 6 months. It took me 7 days to finish it. I carved it. I painted it. I drew it. And you know what happened? I lost myself in that painting. It was like being in another world. I didn't think about eating, sleeping, going to the bathroom, wasn't sad, was just happy, happy, happy all the time. I went to see the doc in a week, and this was back when we had Polaroid cameras, and I took a photo, and he said, "How are you doing on your drawing?" I said, "It's finished." He said, "I thought you told me 6 months." I said, "Well, that's what I thought too." And I told him what happened, and he said, "How big is this?" And I told him, and he was shocked. He said, "You want to do another one?" And I made a whole series, but I want you to know that was how I got through. I was never sad after that again. So if somebody suggests something to you, especially a doctor, listen carefully. Don't push back. They know what they're talking about. You and I are going through it. They've seen it 100 times. They know what can fix it. So I trusted him and it worked.
Beautiful. Using that creative powers to actually what you were doing was you were expressing yourself in a creative way and in a way that brought you joy. So that's another beautiful tip for everyone to remember, is to do that self-nurturing even when you're in the throes of things. So Lynn, thank you so much. I'd like to ask you, where can listeners connect with you?
They can connect with me through Lunch with Lynn at KFred Radio. They can go Google that. I would love that, because all of this stuff has led me to the most wonderful people in my life, the most important people in my life. Or they can go to my email, which is RHL, like really happy Lynn, 6807@gmail.com. I think this has been an amazing life that I've had. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's just helped me do so many good things.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so grateful that you have shared your heart and your solutions and your journey with us today. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You're a wonderful friend.
You are more than welcome. And thank you all for being here today. If one person came to mind while you were listening, feel free to share this conversation with them, because sometimes healing begins simply by realizing, as Lynn said, we're not alone. You can find Untangling the Heart on YouTube, LinkedIn, and wherever you enjoy podcasts. And be sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. So until next time, from my heart to yours.
We've all got stories we don't say out loud, little knots we hide away. You're not broken, you're just learning to be honest with what you feel today. This is untangling the heart, one brave breath, one time.